Police officer heard a little girl cry and scream, "My mom is there." When he opened the trash can, the truth froze him. Before we dive into this story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. It was one of those peaceful Tuesday afternoons in Maplewood, the kind where you could hear the wind dancing through the oak trees and the distant hum of lawnmowers from neighboring yards. Officer Lucas Bennett had been patrolling these familiar streets for nearly 8 years, and he loved the quiet rhythm of this small American town. Children played in backyards, elderly neighbors waved from their porches, and everything felt safe and predictable. But then he heard it, a sound that pierced through the afternoon tranquility like a knife through silk. It was the desperate cry of a child, raw and filled with terror. Lucas immediately pulled his patrol car to the curb and stepped out, his heart already racing. The sound was coming from Maple Street, just 2 blocks from the community center. As he rounded the corner, he saw her, a small figure hunched over on the sidewalk, shoulders shaking with sobs. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old, with tangled brown hair and a bright yellow dress that was now dirty and wrinkled. In her tiny hands, she clutched a small red shoe, just one shoe, as if it were the most precious thing in the world. "Hey there, sweetheart," Lucas said gently, kneeling down to her level. His voice was soft and warm, the same tone he'd used with countless frightened children over the years. "What's your name?" The little girl looked up with the biggest, most frightened brown eyes he'd ever seen. Tears had carved clean streaks down her dirt-smudged cheeks, and her lower lip trembled as she tried to speak. "Sophie," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Sophie Carter." "Sophie, that's a beautiful name," Lucas said, sitting down completely on the sidewalk beside her. Something about this child reminded him of himself at that age, lost, scared, desperately needing someone to notice and care. "Can you tell me what happened? Where are your parents?" Sophie's grip tightened on the red shoe, and fresh tears began streaming down her face. She pointed with her free hand toward the end of the street, where the old Riverside Park began. "My mama is there," she said, her voice breaking. "She's there, and I can't find her, and she's not coming back, and—" The words tumbled out in a rush of panic and confusion. Lucas felt his chest tighten. He'd seen many missing person cases during his career, but something about Sophie's distress felt different, deeper somehow, more complex than a simple case of a child wandering away from her mother at the park. "Okay, Sophie, we're going to find your mama," he promised, his voice steady and reassuring. "Can you show me exactly where you last saw her?" Sophie nodded frantically, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. She stood up on unsteady legs, still clutching that single red shoe, and began walking toward the park. Lucas followed, radioing for backup and keeping his eyes on the trembling little girl, who looked far too small and vulnerable against the vast afternoon sky. As they walked, Sophie kept looking over her shoulder, as if expecting someone to appear behind them. Her fear was palpable, and Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that there was much more to this story than a lost child in a park. When they reached the park entrance, Sophie suddenly stopped and grabbed Lucas's uniform sleeve with her free hand. She looked up at him with those enormous, frightened eyes and whispered words that would haunt him for weeks to come. "He said she would never come back. He said she was gone forever, and it was all my fault." Lucas knelt beside Sophie, his mind racing with questions, when he heard the gentle creak of a screen door opening behind them. A warm voice called out from across the street. "Officer Bennett? Is everything all right, dear?" It was Mrs. Eleanor Henderson, an elderly woman in her 70s who had lived on Maple Street for over 40 years. She emerged from her front porch carrying a soft blue blanket and a steaming mug of hot chocolate, her kind eyes immediately focusing on Sophie's distressed state. "Oh, you poor little angel," Mrs. Henderson said, wrapping the blanket around Sophie's small shoulders. "You must be freezing out here." Sophie looked up at the elderly woman with surprise, as if she hadn't expected such immediate kindness from a stranger. She accepted the hot chocolate with trembling hands, taking small, grateful sips. "Mrs. Henderson," Lucas said, "do you know this little girl? Her name is Sophie Carter." The older woman's expression shifted to one of recognition and concern. "Sophie Carter. Oh my goodness, yes. She lives in the little blue house on Elm Street with her mother, Rachel. Such a sweet woman, always polite when she walked by, but Mrs. Henderson paused, glancing meaningfully at Lucas. She always seemed to be looking over her shoulder, if you know what I mean. More neighbors began to emerge from their homes, drawn by the commotion. Mrs. Garcia from next door brought a plate of cookies, while Mr. Thompson offered to help search the park. It was remarkable how quickly the community rallied around this frightened child. Rachel worked at the flower shop downtown, added Mrs. Garcia, gently stroking Sophie's hair. She was quiet, but she had the most beautiful smile. "Sophie, honey, when did you last see your mama?" Sophie's eyes darted nervously between the adults. "Yesterday morning," she whispered. "She said she had to go somewhere important, and that if anything happened, I should find the nice policeman." Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't a simple case of a lost child. Rachel had planned for this possibility. Mrs. Henderson leaned closer to Lucas and lowered her voice. "Officer, I don't want to alarm anyone, but there was a man here yesterday afternoon, asking questions about Rachel and Sophie. Tall fellow, seemed agitated. He kept asking which house was theirs and when they usually came home." The news about the mysterious visitor sent a wave of unease through Lucas. He gently guided Sophie away from the gathering neighbors to speak with her privately, while Mrs. Henderson and the others continued their concerned whispers. "Sophie, sweetheart," Lucas said, settling down on a park bench with the little girl beside him. "Can you tell me about where you and your mama lived before coming to Maplewood?" Sophie's face scrunched up in concentration, as if trying to remember something important. "We moved here from the place with the big bridges. Mama said we needed a fresh start, somewhere quiet and safe. Did your mama ever seem worried about anything? Did she talk about anyone who might want to find you too?" The little girl nodded slowly, clutching her blanket tighter. "Mama always checked the windows before bedtime. She said it was to make sure they were locked, but sometimes she would stand there for a really long time, just looking outside." Lucas noticed how Sophie avoided mentioning specific details, as if she'd been taught to be careful about what she shared with strangers. This suggested her mother had been genuinely concerned about their safety. "Sometimes the phone would ring," Sophie continued, her voice getting smaller, "and after Mama answered, she would cry. She always tried to hide it, but I could see." Sophie reached into her small pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper and some crayons. Without being asked, she began to draw. Lucas watched as she sketched a house, herself and her mother holding hands. But then she added a dark, looming figure in the corner of the paper. Just a shadow, really, but somehow menacing. "Who is this person, Sophie?" Lucas asked gently, pointing to the dark figure. Sophie's hand stopped moving, and she looked up at Lucas with those enormous, frightened eyes. "Mama said if I ever saw him again, I should run and find help. She said he didn't understand that no means no, and that some grown-ups forget how to be kind." Lucas felt his protective instincts surge. This child and her mother had been running from someone who had made them feel unsafe. But who? And where was Rachel now? "Sophie, your mama sounds very smart and brave," he said. "And you're being very brave too, helping me understand what happened. Do you remember anything else your mama might have said about staying safe?" Sophie brightened slightly. "She said she had a special plan, just in case. She called it our emergency adventure. She said if we ever got separated, I should look for the place where we planted our first flower together." Lucas knew he needed professional help to care for Sophie while they searched for her mother. He contacted Megan Flores, a social worker he'd worked with many times over the years. Megan was known throughout Maplewood for her gentle way with children and her ability to create safe spaces for families in crisis. Within an hour, Megan arrived at Mrs. Henderson's house, where the neighbors had created an impromptu care center for Sophie. She was a warm woman in her early 30s with kind eyes and a reassuring smile. "Hi, Sophie," Megan said, sitting down at the little girl's level. "Officer Bennett told me you're looking for your mama. Would it be okay if I helped you while he searches for her?" Sophie studied Megan's face carefully, as if trying to determine whether she could be trusted. Finally, she nodded. Mama always said to trust people who ask permission before helping. The neighbors had been busy gathering information, Mr. Peterson, who owned the local grocery store, mentioned that Rachel always paid with cash and bought just enough food for a few days at a time. She was friendly enough, he said, but she never lingered to chat like most folks do. Mrs. Thompson from the library added, Rachel loved to read. She'd check out books about gardening and children's stories for Sophie, but she always seemed in a hurry, like she didn't want to stay in one place too long. As the afternoon wore on, more pieces of Rachel's life in Maplewood began to emerge. She had worked part-time at 3 different places, the flower shop, a bakery, and helping elderly Mrs. Patterson with her garden. Everyone described her the same way, kind, hardworking, but always seeming to listen for something, as if expecting news she didn't want to hear. The strangest thing, said Bob from the flower shop, was that Rachel paid her rent 3 months in advance when she first arrived, said she might need to leave quickly if circumstances changed, and she didn't want to leave anyone in a difficult situation. Lucas felt the pieces clicking together. Rachel hadn't just been careful. She'd been preparing for the possibility that they might need to disappear again. But what had changed? Why had she left Sophie behind this time? Sophie tugged on Megan's sleeve. The nice lady with the flowers, she said, pointing to Bob. Mama always bought yellow daisies there. She said they meant new beginnings, and that someday we wouldn't need new beginnings anymore. We'd just have home. The next morning, Sophie surprised everyone by asking to visit the place where Mama and I planted flowers together. Megan and Lucas exchanged glances. This could be the key to finding Rachel. Sophie led them to Maplewood's small community garden, a peaceful spot behind the library where residents could rent small plots to grow vegetables and flowers. Her steps became more confident as they approached a corner plot filled with bright yellow daisies and cheerful marigolds. This is our special place, Sophie said, running her small hands over the flower petals. Mama said gardens teach us that beautiful things can grow even after hard times. Lucas noticed that the soil in one corner looked recently disturbed. Sophie, did you and your mama bury anything special here? The little girl nodded and pointed to a spot near the largest daisy plant. Our treasure box. Mama said if we ever got separated, I should bring a trusted grown-up here. With Sophie's permission, Lucas carefully dug in the soft earth. About a foot down, his hand hit something solid, a small metal box wrapped in plastic to protect it from moisture. Inside the box, they found a letter written in neat handwriting on lavender-scented paper, along with some photographs of Sophie and Rachel together, and a small savings account booklet. Megan read the letter aloud, her voice gentle. My dearest Sophie, if you are reading this, it means Mama had to go away to make sure we could be safe forever. I want you to know that leaving you, even for a little while, is the hardest thing I've ever had to do. But my love for you is stronger than my fear, and I will always find my way back to you. Look for me where we watched the stars dance in the sky, where we made wishes on dandelion seeds. I'm working to make sure the scared man can never frighten us again. Be brave, my little flower. Help is coming, and our story will have a happy ending. Remember, you are loved beyond all the stars in the sky. Forever your Mama, Rachel. Sophie's eyes filled with tears, but she also smiled. The first real smile Lucas had seen from her. Mama kept her promise. She left me a map to find her. Lucas felt his throat tighten with emotion. This wasn't just a missing person case. It was a story of a mother's incredible love and sacrifice. Sophie, he said gently, do you know the place your Mama is talking about? Where you watched stars dance? Sophie wiped her eyes and nodded with determination. The hill behind Riverside Park where we had picnics and made dandelion wishes. Mama said it was our magic place. Lucas spent the evening making phone calls and following up on leads. What he discovered made him both worried and impressed by Rachel's careful planning. At the courthouse, he learned that Rachel had indeed been working with a family law attorney named Patricia Walsh for the past month. When Lucas contacted Attorney Walsh the next morning, she agreed to meet with him immediately. I was wondering when someone would come asking about Rachel, Patricia said, settling into her office chair with a concerned expression. She was one of the most determined clients I've ever worked with. What kind of legal help was she seeking? Lucas asked. Protection orders and custody documentation, Patricia replied carefully. Rachel needed to establish legal proof that she and Sophie were safe to live independently, without interference from someone from their past. Lucas leaned forward. Someone who had been making them feel unsafe. Patricia nodded. Rachel was very thorough. She brought documentation, witness statements, everything needed to build a strong case. She was incredibly organized, almost like she'd been planning this legal action for months. When did you last see her? 3 days ago. She was supposed to return yesterday with some final paperwork, but she never showed up. That's very unlike Rachel. She was always early for our appointments. Patricia opened Rachel's file and showed Lucas a timeline Rachel had created. She told me she had to take care of one last thing before we could file the final papers. She said once that was done, she and Sophie would finally be truly free to build their life here in Maplewood. Lucas felt a chill. Did she say what this one last thing was? Not specifically, but she mentioned needing to close the door on the past once and for all. I got the impression she was planning to confront someone or some situation directly. Patricia handed Lucas a business card. She asked me to give this to anyone who came looking for her. It's for a victim advocacy center in the next county. The director there, Sarah Mitchell, has been helping Rachel develop a safety plan. When Lucas called Sarah Mitchell, her response was immediate and alarming. Oh my goodness, is Sophie safe? Rachel was supposed to check in with me yesterday. She said if anything went wrong, her first priority was making sure Sophie was protected. What exactly was Rachel planning to do? Lucas asked. She needed to retrieve some important documents and personal items she'd left behind when they moved to Maplewood. Items that would help ensure their legal safety. But she was terrified to go back alone. The revelation that Rachel had returned to face her past sent Lucas into full investigation mode. He organized a meeting with the Maplewood community members who had been helping with the search, and what they shared painted a disturbing picture. Mrs. Henderson had kept a detailed log of the suspicious activity she'd noticed. That man I mentioned wasn't the only strange thing, she said, consulting her notebook. Over the past week, I've seen the same dark car drive slowly through our neighborhood 3 times. The driver seemed to be looking at house numbers. Mr. Thompson added, my wife noticed someone had been going through our mailboxes. Nothing was stolen, but letters were moved around, like someone was looking for specific names. Megan had spent the morning with Sophie, and the little girl had revealed more troubling details. She told me that in their previous town, someone used to call their apartment and hang up when her mama answered, Megan reported. Rachel started unplugging their phone at night so Sophie could sleep. Lucas felt the pieces forming a clearer picture. Someone had been systematically trying to locate Rachel and Sophie, probably using various methods to track them down. The scariest part, Megan continued, is that Sophie mentioned her mama had been teaching her safety games, like how to hide quietly, how to call for help, and what to do if strangers asked questions about their family. But then Sophie surprised everyone by showing a remarkable display of courage and determination. She approached Lucas with her small notebook and a crayon drawing. Officer Lucas, she said, using the name she'd started calling him. I remembered something important. Mama taught me a special song that has clues about places that are safe and places we should avoid. The song was simple, the kind a mother might teach her child as a lullaby. But Lucas recognized it was actually a coded set of instructions. When the moon is high and the stars dance free, look for Mama where the flowers grow tall. When the sun is bright and the world feels right, that's when we'll come home to stay. Sophie, Lucas said gently, what do you think this song means? Sophie's eyes lit up with understanding. It means Mama is waiting until it's safe to come home. The flowers growing tall, that's our garden spot. And she's waiting for the sun to be bright. That means waiting until the scary situation is over. Mrs. Henderson gasped. That clever woman. She created a way to communicate with her daughter even if they got separated. Lucas felt a surge of hope mixed with admiration for Rachel's ingenuity. But he also felt the urgency. If Rachel was hiding and waiting for an all-clear signal, she might not know that help had arrived. Sophie's revelation about the coded song energized the entire search effort. Lucas gathered everyone in Mrs. Henderson's living room, which had become their unofficial headquarters, to decode the message together. "Let's think about this carefully," Megan said, sitting cross-legged on the floor beside Sophie. "Your mama was really smart to create this special song. Can you teach it to all of us?" Sophie nodded eagerly and began to sing in her sweet, clear voice. "When the moon is high and the stars dance free, look for mama where the flowers grow tall. Count the yellow blooms from 1 to 3. That's where love lives through it all. When the sun is bright and the world feels right, that's when we'll come home to stay. Listen for the cardinal's morning flight. It will guide you on your way." Mrs. Henderson clapped her hands together. "Oh, my stars. I know exactly where this is talking about. Behind Riverside Park, there's a meadow where wild sunflowers grow every summer. They're easily 6 feet tall right now." Lucas felt his pulse quicken. "And the cardinal reference?" "Cardinals nest in that area," added Mr. Thompson. "My wife is a bird watcher. She says there's a family of cardinals that return to the same oak tree every year, right at the edge of the sunflower meadow." Sophie jumped up excitedly. "Yes, Mama and I saw the pretty red birds there when we had our picnics. She said cardinals are special because they stay with their families forever." The group decided to organize a careful search of the meadow area the next morning, but Sophie had another idea that surprised everyone. "What if we sing Mama's song really loud when we get there?" she suggested. "If she's hiding and scared, maybe hearing me sing it will let her know it's safe to come out." Lucas was amazed by this little girl's wisdom. "Sophie, that's brilliant. Your mama will recognize your voice and know that you're safe and that help has arrived." That evening, the entire community rallied around the plan. Mrs. Garcia offered to bring a battery-powered speaker to amplify Sophie's voice. The local pastor, Father Miguel, asked if he could say a prayer for Rachel's safe return. Even the teenagers from the high school volunteered to help with the search. As they prepared for the next day's mission, Sophie curled up in Megan's lap and said something that brought tears to everyone's eyes. "I'm not scared anymore. Mama always told me that when good people work together, they can solve any problem. And look how many good people are helping us." Lucas looked around at the room full of neighbors who'd become a temporary family for this brave little girl, and he felt a warmth in his chest that reminded him why he'd become a police officer in the first place. Dawn broke clear and bright as more than 20 Maplewood residents gathered at Riverside Park. The community had truly embraced Sophie and Rachel's story, and people had come from all over town to help with the search. Lucas stood at the entrance, amazed by the turnout. Elderly couples, young families, teenagers, and even local business owners had all volunteered their Saturday morning to help reunite a mother and daughter. Sophie wore her brightest yellow dress, "So Mama can see me from far away," she explained to Megan, and carried a small bouquet of daisies from their community garden plot. Around her neck hung a simple necklace that Mrs. Henderson had given her, with a small heart pendant. "For courage," the elderly woman had said with a wink. Lucas was continually impressed by Sophie's transformation. She seemed to have evolved from a frightened, lost child into a determined little girl on a mission to find her mother. Her brown eyes, which had been filled with terror just days ago, now sparkled with hope and determination. The group made their way through the park and up the gentle hill toward the sunflower meadow. The path was lined with wildflowers, purple asters, white Queen Anne's lace, and bright orange butterfly weed that attracted dozens of monarchs dancing in the morning light. The sunflowers were indeed magnificent, towering golden blooms that swayed gently in the morning breeze, creating a natural cathedral of yellow petals and green stalks that stretched toward the clear blue sky. Some of the stalks were nearly 8 feet tall, their heavy flower heads nodding like friendly giants welcoming visitors to their domain. "This is it," Sophie said with confidence, pointing toward a cluster of particularly tall sunflowers near the old oak tree, where a family of cardinals had built their nest. "This is where Mama and I counted flowers and made wishes on dandelion seeds. We would lie on our backs and look up at the sky through the flower petals." Mrs. Henderson set up the portable speaker while Father Miguel gathered the searchers in a circle. The morning sun filtered through the oak leaves, creating dancing patterns of light and shadow on the faces of the volunteers. "Before we begin," Father Miguel said, his gentle voice carrying across the meadow, Let's take a moment to send out positive thoughts and prayers for Rachel's safety and for this family's reunion. Let's also give thanks for the spirit of community that has brought us all together. The moment of silence was profound and moving. Even the youngest volunteers, children from Sophie's age up to teenagers, seemed to understand they were part of something special, something that would be remembered in Maplewood for years to come, a community coming together to help one of their own. Then Sophie stepped forward, her small hand reaching for the microphone Mrs. Henderson offered her. She began to sing her mother's special song, her voice clear and sweet as it carried across the meadow and beyond. When the moon is high and the stars dance free, look for Mama where the flowers grow tall. Count the yellow blooms from 1 to 3. That's where love lives through it all. After the first verse, something magical happened. Mrs. Garcia began humming along, having heard the melody the night before. Then Mr. Thompson joined in, followed by the teenagers, and soon the entire community was humming the tune while Sophie's pure voice carried the words. The sound of 20 voices supporting Sophie's melody was absolutely beautiful. It seemed to make the sunflowers sway in rhythm and cause the cardinals to peek out curiously from their oak tree home. As they finished the song, Sophie called out in her strongest, most hopeful voice, "Mama, it's Sophie. It's your little flower. The good people are here, and the sun is bright and warm, and it's safe to come home now. Officer Lucas is here, and Miss Megan, and all our new friends who want to help us." For several minutes that felt like hours. They stood in complete silence, listening and watching. Birds called from the trees, bees buzzed among the sunflowers, and the gentle breeze rustled through the stalks, creating a whispering sound like nature itself was holding its breath. Then Lucas heard it, a faint sound that made his heart race and brought tears to his eyes. It was barely audible at first, but unmistakable. Someone was singing the same melody, very quietly, from somewhere deeper in the meadow. The faint singing grew slightly louder, and Lucas felt every muscle in his body tense with anticipation. He motioned for everyone to stay calm and move slowly toward the sound, his police training kicking in even as his heart pounded with excitement for Sophie's sake. Sophie gripped his hand tightly with one small fist, while clutching her daisy bouquet with the other, her whole body vibrating with barely contained excitement and hope. "That's Mama," she whispered, her voice filled with absolute certainty. I know her voice anywhere in the whole world. As they made their way deeper into the sunflower meadow, following the sound of the singing, they discovered something remarkable hidden among the tall stalks. A small, carefully constructed shelter that showed incredible ingenuity and planning. It was made from fallen branches woven together with what appeared to be strips of fabric, covered with leaves, and a weathered camping tarp that blended perfectly with the natural surroundings. Around the shelter, they could see evidence of someone living there for several days. A small area where a fire had been carefully contained with stones, empty water bottles arranged to catch rainwater, and what looked like a makeshift clothesline strung between 2 sunflower stalks. "Mama?" Sophie called softly, her voice trembling with emotion. "It's me. It's your little flower. I brought help, just like you taught me to do." The singing stopped abruptly, and they heard rustling from inside the makeshift shelter. Then, slowly, cautiously, a woman's face appeared through the opening, thin, tired, with leaves in her dark hair, but unmistakably filled with overwhelming relief and joy at the sound of her daughter's voice. "Sophie? Oh, my darling, my brave, wonderful little girl." Rachel Carter emerged from her hiding place like a butterfly from a cocoon, and Sophie broke free from Lucas's hand to run into her arms with a cry of pure happiness that brought tears to every adult present. Lucas felt his throat tighten with emotion as he watched the reunion. Rachel was clearly exhausted. Her clothes were wrinkled and dirty, and she looked like she'd lost weight. But her eyes shone with such love and relief as she held her daughter that it was one of the most beautiful sights he'd ever witnessed in his years as a police officer. "I've been so scared," Rachel said, tears streaming down her face as she rocked Sophie back and forth. "I've been hiding here for 3 days, watching the town from up on the hill, waiting and hoping and praying that you were safe, that someone kind had found you and was taking care of you." As the community gathered around them in a respectful circle, giving the family space but offering their silent support and love, Rachel began to explain her story to Lucas and Megan. Her voice was hoarse from days of worry and minimal speaking. I had to go back to our old town to get important documents, she explained, still holding Sophie tightly. Things that would prove my case in court and make sure Sophie and I could live safely and legally, without looking over our shoulders anymore. But when I got there, I discovered that he had been asking around about us, trying to find where we'd moved to. She showed them a small bundle of papers she'd kept carefully wrapped in multiple layers of plastic bags. Birth certificates, school records, medical files, court documents, witness statements. Everything I need to make sure he can never bother us again, never make us feel unsafe or unwelcome anywhere. Rachel had created a series of numbered notes during her days in hiding, and she'd left them in different spots around her shelter, like a journal of her thoughts and fears. Each note was written on whatever paper she could find and was carefully protected from the weather. Lucas read one aloud. Day 1. My darling Sophie, Mama is being extra careful to make sure we're completely safe before coming home. I can see our beautiful town from here, and I'm watching over you even though we're apart. I know you're brave and smart, and I know you'll find help if you need it. Another note, more recent, read, Day 3. I heard voices and singing in the distance today. Could it be you, my little songbird? My heart wants to run to you right now, but my mind says wait until I'm absolutely certain that help has arrived and that we're truly safe. The final note, written just that morning, brought everyone to tears. The sunflowers have been keeping me company, just like they kept us company during our happy picnics. Soon we'll have picnics again, but this time we'll never have to worry about packing up and running away. This time we'll be home forever. Sophie hugged her mother even tighter and looked up at the circle of caring faces around them. Mama, you don't have to hide anymore. Officer Lucas and Miss Megan and all these wonderful people are going to help us stay safe forever and ever. As the community helped Rachel gather her few belongings from the makeshift shelter, Lucas noticed something that made his investigative instincts sharpen. Rachel kept checking her phone anxiously, as if expecting important news, and she seemed reluctant to leave the meadow despite being reunited with Sophie. Rachel, Lucas said gently, is there something else you're worried about? You're safe now, and Sophie is safe. We can head back to town whenever you're ready. Rachel looked around at all the kind faces surrounding her and Sophie, then took a deep breath. There's something I haven't told you yet, something that changes everything. She reached into her bundle of documents and pulled out an official-looking envelope that was still sealed. When I went back to get our papers, I also went to the police station in our old town. I finally found the courage to file a formal report about everything that happened to us. Megan knelt down beside Rachel in the grass. That must have been incredibly difficult and brave. It was terrifying, Rachel admitted, but I realized that Sophie and I would never truly be free until I faced the truth officially. While I was there, Detective Morrison told me something amazing. Rachel's voice grew stronger as she continued. It turns out that other women had also filed reports about the same person. 3 other women, actually, with very similar stories to ours. The detective said they'd been building a case, but they needed more evidence and witnesses. Sophie looked up at her mother with wide, curious eyes. What does that mean, Mama? It means, sweetheart, that by being brave and telling the truth, Mama helped make sure that he can never frighten any other families the way he frightened us. Lucas felt a surge of professional satisfaction and personal relief. Rachel, are you saying that charges have been filed? Rachel nodded, tears of relief streaming down her face. Yesterday morning, just before I came back to Maplewood, Detective Morrison called me. He's been arrested and charged with multiple serious crimes. There will be a trial, but I won't have to go through it alone. There are other witnesses, other evidence. The weight of this news settled over the group like sunshine breaking through clouds. Father Miguel spoke first. Rachel, do you understand what this means? You and Sophie are truly free now. Free to build your life here in Maplewood without fear. But Rachel surprised everyone with her response. I know we're legally safe now, but I've learned something even more important over these past few days. She looked around at the faces of her new neighbors. Mrs. Henderson with her warm blankets and hot chocolate. Mrs. Garcia with her comforting cookies. Mr. Thompson with his willingness to search. Father Miguel with his prayers, and all the others who had dropped everything to help a virtual stranger and her frightened child. I've learned that safety isn't just about legal documents and court orders, Rachel said, her voice filled with wonder. Real safety comes from being surrounded by people who care about you, people who will show up when you need help, people who will sing your child's special song in a meadow full of sunflowers. Sophie stood up and brushed the dirt off her yellow dress. Mama, does this mean we get to stay in Maplewood forever? Does this mean we never have to pack our suitcases in the middle of the night again? Yes, my little flower, Rachel said, pulling Sophie close. This means we're home. Mrs. Henderson stepped forward with a warm smile. Well then, I think this calls for a celebration. Why don't we all head back to town? I've got a big pot of soup on the stove, and Mrs. Garcia mentioned something about making her famous tres leches cake. As the group began to make their way back through the sunflower meadow toward town, Sophie skipped ahead with some of the other children who had joined the search, her laughter carrying on the breeze. Lucas walked beside Rachel, and she turned to him with gratitude shining in her eyes. Officer Bennett, I don't know how I can ever thank you. You didn't just help me find my daughter. You helped us find our home. You don't need to thank me, Lucas replied, thinking about his own childhood and how different it might have been if a community like this had surrounded his family. You and Sophie have given all of us a gift too. You've reminded us what it means to be neighbors, to be a real community. The walk back to Maplewood was like a parade of joy, with Sophie practically floating on air as she walked between her mother and Lucas, holding both of their hands. But as they approached the edge of town, Sophie suddenly stopped walking and turned to face the entire group. Wait, she said in her clear, confident voice. I want to say something important to everyone. The procession came to a gentle halt, and all eyes turned to this remarkable 6-year-old who had been through so much and had shown such incredible bravery throughout their ordeal. Sophie looked up at her mother first, then at Lucas, then at Megan, and finally let her gaze sweep across all the faces of the community members who had spent their weekend helping to reunite her family. When I was scared and lost and crying on the street, Sophie began, her voice growing stronger with each word, I thought I was all alone in the whole world. I thought nobody would care about one little girl and her mama, Mrs. Henderson dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, and several of the teenagers found themselves leaning in to hear every word this wise little girl had to say. But then Officer Lucas found me, and he listened to me, and he believed me when I said my mama needed help. And then Miss Megan made me feel safe and warm, and then Mrs. Henderson gave me blankets and hot chocolate, and Mrs. Garcia gave me cookies, and Mr. Thompson helped look for Mama. Sophie paused and took a deep breath, as if gathering courage for something particularly important. And then all of you came to help us today, even though you had other things you could have been doing on your Saturday morning. You came because you cared about us, even though we were just strangers. Rachel knelt down beside her daughter, her eyes glistening with pride and amazement at Sophie's poise and wisdom. I want to tell you something that my mama taught me, Sophie continued. She taught me that families aren't just the people who are born with you. Families are the people who choose to love you and take care of you and show up when you need help. The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word from this extraordinary child. So I have an idea, Sophie announced, her eyes sparkling with excitement. What if we all became a big family? What if Maplewood became the kind of place where nobody ever has to be scared or alone, because we all take care of each other? She turned to Lucas. Officer Lucas, you could be like our big brother who keeps everyone safe. She turned to Megan. And Miss Megan, you could be like our sister who helps families when they're having troubles. She looked at Mrs. Henderson. And Mrs. Henderson, you could be like our grandma who always has warm blankets and hugs ready. One by one, Sophie addressed each person in the group, giving them a special role in her vision of a community family. By the time she finished, there wasn't a dry eye among the adults. But most importantly, Sophie said, saving her biggest idea for last, what if we made a promise to each other? A promise that if anyone in Maplewood ever feels scared or alone or lost, they can ask for help, and we'll all come running, just like you did for me and Mama today. Father Miguel stepped forward, his voice thick with emotion. Sophie, I think that's the most beautiful idea I've ever heard. And I think I speak for everyone here when I say yes. Yes to becoming a community family. Yes to taking care of each other. Yes to making sure nobody in Maplewood ever has to face their troubles alone. The crowd erupted in applause and cheers, and suddenly everyone was hugging everyone else. And Sophie found herself being passed from one loving pair of arms to another, giggling with pure joy at the warmth and acceptance surrounding her. Rachel stood in the center of it all, watching her daughter, her brave, wise, wonderful daughter, bring together an entire community through the simple power of love and hope. "How did I get so lucky?" Rachel whispered to Lucas, who was standing beside her with a huge grin on his face. "I don't think it's luck," Lucas replied, watching Sophie demonstrate to the younger children how to make wishes on dandelion seeds. "I think it's what happens when extraordinary people meet extraordinary circumstances, and everybody chooses love over fear." Sophie's vision of a community family sparked something magical in Maplewood that went far beyond what anyone could have anticipated. It was as if her simple words that day in the sunflower meadow had planted seeds of their own, seeds of hope, compassion, and connection that began sprouting throughout the entire town. Word of the little girl's wisdom and the community's heartwarming response spread quickly through social media, local newspapers, and word of mouth. By Monday morning, Lucas arrived at the police station to find his desk covered with messages from other communities asking about Maplewood's family approach to helping people in crisis. 3 different newspapers wanted to interview Sophie and Rachel. The state social services department was asking if they could study what Maplewood had done as a model for other towns, and a children's television show had even called asking if Sophie would share her story on their program. But the most amazing developments were happening right in the community itself, growing organically from the genuine care and connection that had been sparked during their search for Rachel. Mrs. Henderson had organized what she called the Sophie Circle, a network of neighbors who checked on each other daily through a simple system of porch lights. A light left on after 9 p.m. meant all is well, while a light turned off meant, "Please check on me." Within days, elderly residents, single parents, and anyone living alone felt connected to a web of caring that ensured no one would ever be forgotten or overlooked. Mrs. Garcia had started what quickly became known as the Community Kitchen, not a formal program, but a beautiful tradition where families took turns preparing extra portions of their evening meals to share with neighbors who might be going through difficult times, celebrating special occasions, or simply could use a helping hand. The teenagers who had helped with the search, led by 16-year-old Maria Santos and 17-year-old Jake Thompson, created an innovative buddy system that went far beyond just walking children to school. They organized homework help sessions in the library, taught younger kids how to ride bikes safely, and even started a Little Buddy Big Buddy mentorship program that paired high school students with elementary children. Mr. Thompson and the other business owners established what they called the Fresh Start Fund, a discreet financial assistance program for families in transition, funded by small monthly contributions from local businesses and individual donors. The fund helped with everything from security deposits on apartments to school supplies for children, always administered with dignity and respect. But perhaps most significantly, Sophie herself had become the town's unofficial ambassador of hope and courage, though she remained completely unaware of her growing influence. Children from all over Maplewood and even neighboring towns came to hear her tell the story of how she found help when she needed it most. Parents found themselves having important conversations with their kids about community, safety, and the power of asking for help when you're scared or confused. "Sophie has this amazing ability to make everyone feel brave," explained Mrs. Martinez, the kindergarten teacher at Maplewood Elementary. "When new students are shy or worried about making friends, I tell them Sophie's story about how she was scared too, but she found help by being honest about her feelings and asking for support. It gives them permission to be vulnerable and to trust that adults will take care of them." On Wednesday afternoon, exactly 1 week after the Meadow reunion, Sophie announced that she had something very important to do. She insisted on returning to the Sunflower Meadow with Rachel, Lucas, and Megan, carrying a small backpack that she had packed herself and refused to let anyone else carry. This is where everything changed. Sophie said as they stood among the tall golden flowers that swayed gently in the afternoon breeze. The meadow looked different now, more peaceful, more welcoming somehow, as if it too had been transformed by the love and hope that had been planted there. "This is where I learned that being brave doesn't mean you're never scared," Sophie continued, her voice carrying the wisdom of someone far older than her 6 years. "Being brave means you ask for help when you need it, and you believe that good people will answer when you call." She pulled out a small wooden box from her backpack, beautifully carved and painted with sunflowers and hearts. "Mama and I made this together," she explained. "We want to create something special here, something that will help other people who might be scared or lost or worried about their families." To everyone's surprise, Sophie began carefully placing items in the box while explaining their significance. The small heart necklace that Mrs. Henderson had given her went in first. "This represents all the kindness that strangers showed me when I needed it most." Next came the savings account booklet from their original buried treasure box. "This represents our old life, when Mama and I had to save every penny because we never knew when we might have to run away. We don't need it anymore because now we have something better than money. We have a community that will always take care of us." Megan added a small social services pamphlet. "This represents all the families who are still looking for help and safety. May they find their way to communities like ours, where children are believed and protected." Lucas contributed his original police notepad, the one he'd used to write down all the clues and information during their search. "This represents the importance of listening to children, taking their concerns seriously, and never giving up on finding answers and solutions." Rachel added the letter she had written and buried in the community garden. "This represents a mother's love, and the lengths we'll go to protect our children, even when we're scared." But Sophie's final contribution was the most meaningful of all. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a small sunflower plant, its roots carefully wrapped in damp paper towels. "This is a baby sunflower that grew from seeds from this very meadow," she explained. "I've been taking care of it on Mrs. Henderson's windowsill, waiting for it to be strong enough to come home." She carefully planted the small sunflower next to the spot where her mother's shelter had been, patting the earth gently around its roots. "This will grow big and strong, and when other people come here feeling scared or lost, they'll see it and know that this is a place where hope grows, where families are reunited, and where love always finds a way." As they prepared to leave the meadow, Sophie had one more surprise. She began to sing her mother's special song one last time, but this version included new verses she had created. "When hearts are scared and hope feels small, look for friends who hear your call. In every town and every street, kind people wait for you to meet. When troubles come and nights are long, remember this, our family song. No child should face their fears alone. Love will always guide them home." As her voice carried across the meadow, they heard something magical, other voices joining in from the direction of town. Children were singing along from the playground at Riverside Park, their voices joining Sophie's across the distance, creating a chorus of hope that seemed to embrace the entire community. "Do you hear that, Mama?" Sophie asked with wonder, her eyes shining with joy. "Our song is growing. It's becoming everyone's song. It's becoming the sound of Maplewood taking care of everyone who lives here." Rachel pulled her daughter close, and Lucas felt that familiar warmth spreading through his chest as he realized what they had all witnessed and been part of. They hadn't just solved a missing person case or reunited a family. They had created something that would ripple outward for generations, a living example of what communities could become when ordinary people chose to act with extraordinary love and courage. The following Saturday, exactly 1 week after their emotional return to the Sunflower Meadow, Sophie made an announcement that would forever change how Maplewood celebrated community and family. She wanted to organize what she called a Community Family Promise Day in the town square, a special ceremony where everyone could officially commit to being part of each other's lives. What started as another simple idea from a 6-year-old quickly grew into the most significant event in Maplewood's history. Local businesses donated food, decorations, and their expertise. The bakery created a massive cake shaped like a sunflower, with each petal representing a different family in the community. The hardware store donated materials to build a permanent community message board. Rachel spent the week working with attorney Patricia Walsh to create a special community document, a written commitment that families could sign pledging to support each other through good times and difficult times alike. The document, beautifully written on parchment paper and decorated with children's drawings of sunflowers, read, "We, the families of Maplewood, promise to watch out for each other's children, to offer help without being asked, to celebrate each other's joys, and to provide comfort during sorrows. We promise that no child will ever feel alone, no parent will face challenges without support, and no family will be forgotten. This is our covenant of love, signed with grateful hearts." As the celebration began on that bright Saturday morning, something extraordinary was taking place. Families who had lived in Maplewood for decades but barely knew each other were sharing their stories, dreams, and hopes for the community they were creating together. Mrs. Patterson, the 90-year-old widow whom Rachel helped with gardening, brought photo albums showing what Maplewood had looked like 50 years ago. "I've lived here most of my life," she told a group of fascinated children, "but I've never seen our town more beautiful than it is right now, because of the love that fills it." The Nguyen family, recent immigrants, found themselves surrounded by neighbors eager to help them practice English conversation. Their 8-year-old daughter, Lynn, quickly became Sophie's latest best friend. High school students set up a community wisdom booth where elderly residents shared stories while teenagers recorded them, creating an oral history that would preserve the community's memories for future generations. The highlight came when Sophie addressed the crowd from the decorated bandstand. "Dear family," Sophie began, and the words seemed to envelope everyone in warmth and belonging. "3 weeks ago, I was the scariest person in Maplewood, scared and crying and not knowing who to trust. Today, I'm looking at the biggest, most wonderful family any little girl could dream of." She paused and looked around at all the faces, babies in strollers, great-grandparents in lawn chairs, teenagers, families who had been in Maplewood for generations, and newcomers who had arrived just weeks ago. "I learned that being part of a family isn't about living in the same house or having the same last name. Being part of a family is about choosing to love people, choosing to help them when they're in trouble, and choosing never to let them face scary things all by themselves." Mrs. Henderson stepped forward with a beautiful community scrapbook. "Sophie and Rachel, this is from all of us," she announced. "It has pictures from our search day, letters and drawings people made for you, and hundreds of blank pages for all the memories we're going to make together." Sophie clutched the scrapbook and beamed at the crowd. "This is the most beautiful treasure anyone has ever given me, but I have something special for all of you too." She pulled out dozens of small packages wrapped in colorful paper. With help from other children, she began distributing them throughout the crowd. "These are seed packets that Mama and I made together," Sophie announced, as families opened their gifts to find sunflower seeds with small cards. "Each packet has seeds from our special meadow, the place where our family grew from just 2 scared people, to all of you wonderful people." Each card contained the same message: "Plant these with love, water them with kindness, and watch how beautiful things can grow when communities take care of each other. Love, Sophie and Rachel Carter, your grateful family." Father Miguel stepped up to the microphone. "Sophie has given us more than seeds today. She has given us a living symbol of what we can grow together when we plant love and kindness in our community." As families began signing the community covenant document, something beautiful began to happen. People weren't just signing their names, they were adding personal promises. The Martinez family promises to always have extra cookies for any child who needs a snack. The Thompson hardware store promises free supplies for any family emergency. The Johnson family promises our guest room for families in transition. As the afternoon turned into evening, and families shared potluck dinners under strings of lights, Rachel found herself standing beside Lucas and Megan, watching Sophie lead children in creating chalk art around the square. "3 weeks ago, I was desperately trying to protect my daughter from a hopeless situation," Rachel said quietly. "Tonight I'm part of something I never knew existed, a real community that celebrates differences and creates connections that prevent problems before they start." As the stars began to appear, Sophie ran over to them, her face glowing with happiness. chalk dust on her yellow dress and flowers in her hair. "Mama," she said, "I think today was even more special than the day we found you in the meadow. Do you know why?" Rachel knelt down, curious about her daughter's insight. "Because today wasn't about solving a problem," Sophie explained. "Today was about creating something beautiful and permanent. Today, we built something that will last forever, even when I'm grown up and have my own little girl someday." Rachel felt tears in her eyes as she realized the profound truth in Sophie's words. "You're absolutely right, my little flower. Today we didn't just find a family, we created a legacy." 1 year later, spring had transformed Maplewood into a living testament to Sophie's vision. The sunflowers from the seed packets were now sprouting in gardens throughout the town, bright green shoots pushing up through the soil with the same determination Sophie had shown that frightening day when she was lost and crying on Maple Street. The transformation went far beyond flowers. The community support network had become so effective that delegations from other towns arrived monthly to study the Maplewood model. University researchers documented how ordinary people created extraordinary safety nets through intentional relationship building and mutual care. Rachel had found her calling as director of the Maplewood Community Connection Center, perfectly combining her nurturing abilities with her wisdom about helping families in transition. Sophie was thriving in first grade, where her teacher marveled at her natural ability to make every child feel included and valued. Lucas had been promoted to community liaison officer, preventing crises through relationship building and early intervention. Megan's Family Support Center had become a regional model, with families who had been helped returning as volunteers, creating a beautiful cycle of support. The most remarkable change was cultural. Maplewood had developed what researchers called collective resilience, a community-wide ability to face challenges in ways that strengthened rather than strained the social fabric. When families faced emergencies, they weren't just helped, they were embraced, supported, and strengthened by dozens of neighbors working together. These responses arose spontaneously from the network of relationships that had grown from Sophie's simple insight that communities could choose to become families. On the first anniversary of Community Family Promise Day, the town square was decorated with 8-foot sunflower giants whose golden faces followed the sun, creating a natural cathedral of beauty in the heart of Maplewood. Sophie, now 7 years old, stood before her community family accompanied by Lynn Nguyen, Marcus Williams, and 6 other children who had become the unofficial community council. "Dear family," Sophie began, her voice stronger but still carrying the same warmth that had touched so many hearts. "When we gathered here a year ago, we planted seeds of hope in our gardens and in our hearts. Look what we've grown together." She gestured toward the magnificent sunflowers, but also toward faces of people who had become chosen family, bound together by daily decisions to show up for each other. But the most amazing thing we grew wasn't flowers or programs. We grew something precious, the understanding that love isn't something you feel, it's something you do. Love is checking on your neighbor. Love is helping new families feel welcome. Love is listening when someone is scared. Love is never letting anyone face troubles alone. Lynn Nguyen stepped forward, her English now confident. "Sophie taught us that being brave isn't about not being scared. Being brave is about asking for help when you need it, and offering help when others need it." Marcus Williams added, "She taught us that families aren't just people who look like you. Families are people who choose to take care of each other every single day." Sophie reached into her backpack and pulled out a time capsule, a beautiful wooden box carved by high school students, painted by elementary students, and filled with items representing their community's journey. "We want to bury this time capsule right here," Sophie announced, "so that 50 years from now, when I'm a grandmother, people will remember what we learned together." The time capsule contained photographs from Community Family Promise Day, copies of the covenant document signed by every family, children's artwork, and handwritten letters from families describing what the Maplewood family had meant to them. But the most precious item was Sophie's own letter, which Rachel read aloud. "Dear future families of Maplewood, my name is Sophie Carter, and I am 7 years old. When I was 6, I was scared and lost. But this town showed me that there are always good people ready to help, communities willing to grow bigger to include one more family, and reasons to believe every scary situation can become a beautiful story. The most important thing I learned is that you don't have to be related to be family. You just have to love them enough to show up when they need you and never let them face hard times alone. If you are reading this, you are part of our Maplewood family now. Welcome home. Take care of each other. Plant flowers together. Remember that love is something you do every single day. Love always, Sophie Carter and all the families who chose to love each other. As Mayor Williams and Sophie buried the time capsule beneath the largest sunflower, the community joined hands in a circle and sang Sophie's song one final time. When hearts are scared and hope feels small, look for friends who hear your call. No child should face their fears alone. Love will always guide them home. We are family, chosen and true. In Maplewood, dreams come true. Where sunflowers grow and children play, love gets stronger every day. As the sun set, casting golden light across the sunflowers and faces of people who had learned that love multiplies when shared, Sophie Carter, no longer a lost, frightened child, but a confident young leader surrounded by infinite love, knew she had helped create something that would outlast her lifetime. Not just a safe place to live, but a template for how human beings could choose to treat each other. A beacon of hope inspiring other towns and children who needed to know that there are always people ready to help. The small red shoe that started it all was displayed in the community center, not as a reminder of fear, but as a symbol of the transformations that begin when one child finds courage to trust, when communities decide that love is a daily practice of caring for each other. "Mama," Sophie said softly as families headed home through streets lined with blooming sunflowers, "our story really did get the most beautiful ending, didn't it?" Rachel squeezed her daughter's hand and looked at the community that had become their extended family. "No, sweetheart," Rachel replied with a smile that captured all the joy in her heart. "Our story didn't get an ending at all. This is just the beginning of something beautiful that will keep growing for as long as people remember that love is a choice we make every day." And in the growing twilight, as porch lights twinkled like earthbound stars, and the sound of children's laughter carried on the evening breeze, Sophie's truth echoed through Maplewood, that home is not a place but a feeling, and family is defined not by blood, but by the daily decision to love and care for each other, no matter what.